You know that Call Her Daddy podcast? You probably only know it because of all the hoopla surrounding Kamala Harris appearing on it during the campaign.
Yeah, they made a whole fake set in Vegas for her. She didn't show up. Then they went to D.C. and spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes.
So this Call Her Daddy podcast is hosted by this whorish woman named Alex Cooper. The show basically is, as I understand it, and there's some clips online associated with the story that speak to it. It's young girls talking in graphic detail about sex.
Yeah. They did a whole, well, I won't say, but they did a whole podcast on something going on in the heathen region.
Okay, if you could graduate from fifth grade.
Well, I don't want to say it because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want any emails before the Christmas break.
You can't say oral sex on the air? I just
fine.
said it.
There, go.
Good grief.
Okay, well, they did a whole hour podcast about that.
I think that's most of the show, like multiple podcasts.
Oh, all right, well.
I don't know, but anyway.
It's boorish. It's embarrassing.
The host was interviewed at the New York Times Deal Book Summit, which is where we found out from Aaron Ross Sorkin's probing interview. Heady stuff, pun intended. Where we found out about the set that was constructed and the cost and where it took place from the host. According to Vulture, which is a news cultural outlet, I guess. After she did that interview with the equally whorish Aaron Ross Sorkin at the Deal Book Summit, New York Times event, she heard someone was excited to meet her. Who is that person who went before me that really wanted to meet me? She asked the publicist. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell.
No, come on. That's fake news.
It's not. I don't think it is fake news. Jerome Powell is, when he's not raising or cutting interest rates, he's glued to the Call Me Daddy podcast.
Gross.
Another creepster. Do we have any knowledge of Jay Powell's attendance to Epstein Island or P. Diddy parties? Oh, boy. Okay. There's the intersection of culture and financial news, isn't there? Jim Iuorio joins us now. He's a podcaster. Jim, have you been on the Call Me Daddy podcast? Are you a fan?
No. And how is my podcast supposed to compete with them talking about whatever it was that Amy said that I wouldn't want to say either?
Yeah.
Oh, he's got a new name on Instagram, Daddy J Pow.
I bet he does. Is that his? Or
no,
is that
it's a spoof, but that's great.
Well, no kidding. I assume he's not that.
Purveyors of Money printed in the best, and I love that show. Okay.
Yeah. Jay Powell. Call me.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't make this stuff
Can I
up.
remind you guys of something real quick, though? Because, this isn't even the craziest thing ever. Remember, we had a congressman, literally with the last name of Wiener, who was sending, you know what, I won't even finish that sentence.
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
What kind of comedic gift that was several years ago?
Yeah, but Jerome Powell, he's in the great-granddad category. Well, at least he looks like a great-grandfather.
That's a good point.
Jim Iuorio is the host, not of Call Me Daddy, the Future's Edge podcast, where I don't believe oral sex is discussed. Did I just make everybody uncomfortable? Good. He's also a special contributor to WirePoints, wirepoints.org. Jim, on a serious note, the announcement of the SoftBank $100 billion investment that was offered by Trump and the head of SoftBank earlier this week. The Wall Street Journal pointed out it's interesting. You're celebrating $100 billion from this Korean magnate and his company, and yet you take an antagonist position to Nippon Steel buying U.S. Steel. Isn't that hypocritical?
There's no question. And it just, I think with Donald Trump, and again, for people listening, I support Donald Trump. I voted for Donald Trump. It is a binary, though, so it is time to pick apart and see what the problems are with his policy. And his policies seem to just go what he thinks public opinion will be. Now, oftentimes that's not that bad a thing, but right now it does create a hypocritical thing. Now, he looks at the SoftBank thing, and it's like symbolic of attracting the world's dollars to invest in U.S. dollars and bring it on shore, whatever. Now, SoftBank, by the way, does not have the greatest reputation of being the most timely investor in the world, too. They've had some big things that they wanted a mulligan for, I'm quite sure. By the way, I like that. I'd use some golf parlance to bring you in.
Very nice. Right. I mean, I was actually going to raise that issue, too, because it sort of feels a little bit like Foxconn in Wisconsin, which didn't really live up to the promise, did it?
Bingo. No, but for a symbolic standpoint, that's good. Now, when Trump then looks at Nippon Steel making the purchase here, that he then thinks all of a sudden then he becomes defensive like that. Oh, they're trying to take over. So, yeah, it's a thin line to walk. And is it hypocritical? Absolutely, it's hypocritical. And hopefully there won't be too many more instances of this, too. And I know he does want to attract the world's dollars to invest in the U.S., so I hope he concentrates more on that than vilifying other things.
But I want you to hear this because he was such a boss at that press conference he had yesterday. He took 33 questions from reporters. He had the CEO of SoftBank with him, and he wanted to make the 100 billion, 200 billion. Listen to this.
I'm thrilled to announce that SoftBank will be investing $100 billion in America.
And we were discussing, and President Trump said, Masa, double that is not enough. Maybe, go for more, right?
That's what I'm going to ask him right now. Would you make it $200 billion instead of He'll make it. $200 billion investment.
He's an ultimate negotiator doing that in front of, everybody was watching, but he didn't balk on the $200 billion. So is that going to do anything for our economy, Jim Iuorio?
Well, I mean, it is symbolic of what could be to come, and I do think that his policies of, we've talked about this on this show before, too. When he talks about tariffs, he's not a fan of tariffs. He wants the world to drop their tariffs, and he wants to encourage companies to invest here, produce here, build their plants here. So that's what that's all designed to achieve. Now, is the SoftBank thing a big deal? No, it's not a big deal. Is it symbolic of perhaps things to come? Yes. Are we in a far, far better place? I was just thinking about this before we got on, is that of Donald Trump's economic policies, I agree with about 60% of them and disagree with about 40% of them. We went over that with the Nippon Steel thing, too, which is so different than who they were running against, who I literally disagreed with 100% of their policies, and anyone else with a working knowledge of even basic economics would feel the same way. So are we in a great spot? Well, hell yeah, we're in a great spot compared to where we could have been, but there are some sort of bipolar things coming out of the Trump administration, which, by the way, it's going to be a difficult 2025 to get us back where we need to be.
The retail sector, store closures up 69% from last year, 69% year over year. Major retailers shutting down thousands of locations, leading with the drugstores. Is that a problem, or is that just Schumpeterian creative destruction?
No, it is definitely a problem. And this notion that they've been feeding us for the last year, that we have this outstanding economy, and then they look at numbers like retail sales, which came out yesterday, which have been inflated for the whole year. Guess one of the reasons why they're inflated is that there's massive inflation and people have to spend more money. It's measured in net dollar terms. Secondly, there is very little question that the policies of the last 5 years have absolutely gutted the middle class, made the rich far richer. The asset holders have never been more wealthy in this country. But the bottom 60% who aren't the asset holders are already in kind of a massive recession. Now throw in the fact that they've literally been lying about the labor numbers for 2 years. And I don't know if you remember, 3 months ago, they all of a sudden came and said, yeah, we overestimated 850,000 jobs. Now they're doing it again where they're coming back saying, yeah, we may have overestimated it by another 200,000 jobs. And even inside of that, the jobs that they all created were side hustle, Uber drivers, delivery service, healthcare, education, and government. So this is a really, really bad labor market. They've been telling us it's a good labor market. But now, as far as retail's closing, absolutely, it's going to happen. We are starting to feel the effects of, they tried to hold it up with government spending for so long, but there are some very difficult times. Now, can Trump ride in on a white horse, start slashing corporate taxes and right the ship? Yes, I think he can, but I think he has to act really quickly.
Well, the other thing, too, I mean, just in terms of who's leading, I mentioned drugstores like CVS, but also, for people that are on a budget and maybe lower middle income, Family Dollar is the retailer that is slashing the most stores, did slash the most retail locations this year. So then you have fewer affordable shopping options for people too. So the walls continue closing in.
There's no question about it. We are not in a great spot right now. But again, I think that there's a lot of people who are very, very hopeful, me being one of them. But that doesn't mean I'm 100% confident that he can right the ship quickly. But the things he should do right off the bat would be to slash corporate taxes, slash capital gains tax. Now, the capital gains tax, they've only talked about casually, at 23.8% is absolutely punitive, and what it ends up doing is stops people from actually making the right capital allocation decisions, and it puts money in the wrong places because people don't want to sell to pay the government, me included. So if he does those two things right away, I think he could give us somewhat of a kickstart and then start massively deregulating. They have to look at every federal regulation, every regulatory body, and try to get things going again, or else we don't really have a chance, and we could be sailing towards the rocks. And what that looks like to me is a currency or a bond issue. I don't want to say crisis, but I think we're still a year away from that.
Well, the other piece of this, and he may be further behind the 8 ball than he is already, is federal spend. And we've got a 1,574-page spending bill that is moving through Congress to, quote-unquote, fund the government until the second week of March. Missouri Representative, Republican Eric Burleson, on that spending bill that is moving with the help of Speaker Johnson.
So what are your thoughts on this year? Have you seen the text at all?
It's a total dumpster fire. I think it's garbage. This is what Washington, D.C. has done. This is why I ran for Congress, to try to stop this. And sadly, this is happening again. I think that it's shameful that people that celebrate Doge coming in, and yet we're going to vote for another $1 billion to be added to the deficit. And so it's ironic.
What does this mean for Speaker Johnson's future?
Personally, I'm disappointed. I think that he can do better. He can communicate better. The fact that we haven't seen the language today and we're supposed to vote on it this week is unacceptable.
So, everybody's all pro-Doge because Vivek and Elon are popular, but then they go back to their day jobs and continue behaving the same way they've been behaving.
Not only that, this is the equivalent of like armies in retreat burning the crops to try to starve out the people who are taking over. This is reprehensible that they have accelerated their spending, which is one of the reasons they lost the election, because even casual observers of economics are noticing now that we cannot continue racking up the debt that we have. And so the message happens in the election, and instead of changing their ways and acquiescing to the will of the people, they're accelerating spending on the way out. Even things like selling off portions of the border wall, that everything seems to be like, oh, you don't want us in office? Then here, we're going to fix your wagon. And how could anyone have ever voted for these morons to begin with?
Well, but it's also, as you heard from a Republican, it's Republicans throwing in on this. That's the real problem.
Yeah, I'm nonpartisan and hating the big spenders. Yes, there is Republicans throwing in. They should be fighting a lot more. I don't vote Republicans because I think they're great. I vote for Republicans because I don't like any one of the Democratic policies. So yeah, the Republicans have to get their act together and start fighting. Yes. Yeah,
and it's unfortunate because we have this great model a little bit south of us that could be cut and pasted into the Trump economic agenda. I'm talking about Milei and Argentina. Yeah. Argentina's economy emerged from a recession in the third quarter of 2024. The GDP expanded 3.9% from July to September. The same period a year earlier, the GDP had contracted by 2.1%. He has made brutal spending cuts, moved a massive deregulation drive. He's brought the country's triple-digit annual inflation down to something that is at least manageable, at least within the bounds of light at the end of the tunnel here. He has done an incredible job in a year. And so, reducing the size and scope of government and freeing up markets is good economics, which means it's good policy because it's good for the mass of people.
Yes, of this, there's absolutely no question. It works. He's like our modern-day hero, our modern-day Margaret Thatcher. But there's one element of this that's extremely important, is that you do have to take a couple steps backward before these giant leaps forward. Even the first year he was in office, poverty actually ticked up, and it has to do that. And that's what. So the question becomes: if in 2025 we run bigger deficits than we did in 2024, which that's my base case, I think we will. Perhaps there's a bit of inflation. Perhaps there's even a little bit more pain for people. Will then they punish the Trump administration and the Republicans at the midterms in 2026? Because I think 2026 is when we start to see the fruits of this. This is like planting a tree, man, or planting crops. It doesn't affect us right away. So if we can weather the weakness in the storm, which is, by the way, it's easy for the three of us to say, and then still vote this way, there's one way out, and it involves some pain in the short end.
Well, this is where you have to bring people along, and you have to level with them and make the case relentlessly on a daily basis to explain what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what you anticipate will happen on a particular schedule, and just be transparent about it from the beginning. And then you build trust, and people can buy into, look, we've done this. We've put ourselves in this terrible position that we all know or should know, and I'll remind you where we are, what I inherited, if you will. And this is the path out. And so it's not, without its pitfalls, and you have to understand that. It seems to me that's the program.
And I don't know the answer to this. Do you have confidence that the average voting Joe will be able to see that picture clearly enough to know where we're going? And I don't know. I'm not saying they don't. What do you think?
I think they can if you do some splaining. I think you have to make cases. I think you have to make arguments. He has a lot of political capital right now. I'm talking about Trump, and he's got a lot of surrogates. And smartly, he's got a lot of surrogates that are media savvy in important positions. You can make the case over and over and over again. You also have a fragmented media universe, so you don't have to rely on legacy media to make that case. So there's no reason you can't combine the art of the deal with the art of persuasion. In my view.
I agree with you. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, let's be a positive note. Absolutely.
One other thing I wanted to get your take on, interesting piece in the Journal earlier this week. The Wall Street Titans, Jamie Dimon, Warren Buffett, Ken Griffin, Larry Fink, Ray Dalio, they all said that Bitcoin was a fad. They're moderating their position on Bitcoin and crypto, but specifically Bitcoin, now that it's topped $100,000. What's your take on where that is, and if you do have some of the pain that you just mentioned, currency bond, what the impact will be on the continued rise of Bitcoin and crypto?
So my whole thesis for being in crypto for the last, let's call it 5 years, has been institutional adoption. I've said that on the show before. The moment BlackRock said, yeah, we're increasing our footprint into Bitcoin, I was like, okay, you are, then so am I. And now the U.S. federal government has jumped in. So here's the thesis is, if you're talking about the Ken Griffins and the Jamie Dimons finally coming around on this at the same time that the U.S. government is finally coming around on this and talking about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, et cetera, to me it seems just getting more and more roots. Now, if you would have asked me this question 2 years ago, I would have said, yeah, I'm in Bitcoin. I think there's a solid chance that it could be just some weird Ponzi and it's going to end in tears, and that's fine because I have 1-2% of my net worth in Bitcoin. It's grown more than that now. But now you look at it and say, okay, if these people are really the people who control the purse strings of the entire world, if they are all saying, okay, this might be a reasonable store of value, all this thing needs is a multi-decade track record, and it's building it and building it. So do I think Bitcoin is going to be around in 10 years? Yeah, probably.
Well, but I mean, institutions fail too. We saw that in 2008.
Yeah, but I mean, sure. But can we see an instance where BlackRock, Jamie Dimon, Ken Griffin, all of them getting in at the beginning of this sort of infantile stage of Bitcoin? I don't see it. When you show me that mom and pop's leverages they're leveraging up their home to buy more Bitcoin, then I'll get absolutely terrified of this. But I'm not at this point in time.
Fair point. Jim Iuorio, he's the host of the Future's Edge podcast, not to be confused with Call Her Daddy, and special contributor to wirepoints.org. Jim, thank you as always.
Thank you guys for having me. See you guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. the answer.
Papa Nicholas Coffee, a Chicagoland tradition for over 5 generations, combines heritage and innovation in every cup. Our coffee is locally roasted, hot air roasted, and cold blended in small batches to ensure premium quality. Whether you prefer a 12-ounce bag or a 28-ounce bag, or even the convenience of K-Cups, you'll find Papa Nicholas Coffee at your local retailer. Taste the difference that 5 generations of expertise brings. Choose Papa Nicholas Coffee, because great coffee is our family tradition. Visit online at papanicholas.com. That's papanicholas.com.